ancestors would often say, only the most broken people can be great leaders.
So one day I was just chilling playing Marvel Rivals and I decided to get the Wakanda Forever Namor skin. And I noticed a quote that stuck with me like gum to a shoe. Only the most broken people can be great leaders. And you know, it's kinda bad when a game skin gives me an existential crisis. Not what I wanted for the day. So naturally I thought about this and I wanted to know if there was any level of truth into that quote. If only the most broken people can be great leaders, or just not the exact quote, but basically, can broken people become great leaders? Like, greater people than not broken, if that makes sense? But that's the video idea. I did some research and I wanted to share what I found. Now let's see if this statement is true or false, or even a little bit of both. Our first point from this quote is the question, does trauma equal good leadership skills? The short answer is no, or at least not immediately. The psychology is pretty clear with mental health and disorders, where disorders like PTSD, anxiety, depression, dysregulation, and avoidance behaviors make people feel less functional in society rather than more visionary. Now, you might have noticed that I said not immediately, and that is because I am referring to something called post-traumatic growth, or PTG. PTG is a positive psychological change which is experienced as a result of struggling with highly stressful and highly challenging life circumstances. When some people experience PTG, it means that that person will go on with life with a greater appreciation for life, stronger relationships, better resilience, clearer priorities, better empathy, and higher purpose-driven motivation. With all these qualities, it's easier to see how someone can become a great leader through all of this. However, PTG can happen when people have processed through trauma, have had support, they've made meaning from the suffering, and they integrate it into their identity. So trauma can create powerful leaders, it's just that the phrasing in our initial quote was wrong. Only after the most broken people have healed can they become great leaders. So with that, I'm sure you all think that this is a very bare idea of the whole quote, so let's get into some more detail and talk about how people's bad past can actually improve more cognitive sides to them. First, there is hyper-awareness, where growing up under stress can sharpen stuff like emotional scanning, situational awareness, and pattern recognition. Then we have realism instead of naive optimism, where past hardships teach consequences, limits, and unpredictability. People with difficult pasts and trauma can also provide empathy-driven decision-making, high tolerance for stress, independence, and self-direction. These developments produce people who can lead and provide people who sense risk early and are more careful with planning and how to be self-reliant. Now don't start thinking that trauma is some super solution that'll turn you into Batman, okay? Like I said, there is a chance you can't recover and you will live with anxiety or depression or sometimes PTSD without ever really moving on. And even so, these people will end up being cold, they'll end up with a distrust in people, hyper-control, micromanagement, and aggression under pressure. This does mean that not everyone broken can help or even lead that well. However, like I said, if these mental issues are unresolved and stay with the person instead, the person will become more controlling, authoritarian, and they would justify harm for the greater good. Basically, they'll become your average supervillain, if untreated. Now I know this is mostly a psychological video, with elements of truth about if broken people can become great leaders, but even so, I believe there is a philosophical view as well to this, and also I wanted to balance out the psych talk. And the fact that I want to talk about both or I will go crazy. So, let's do this. Starting with Stoicism. It's an ancient Greek and later Roman philosophy about the belief and teachings of people trying to focus on the things we can control. In this case, our character, our thoughts, our emotions, and actions, while at the same time accepting the things we cannot. In this case, the suffering reveals character. Stoics would believe that adversity produces discipline, wisdom, and perspective. However, only if faced with virtue instead of bitterness, which echoes a lot of what I said previously on the psychological stuff, about how it should be treated instead of hanging on to it. You should move on and accept the past instead of clinging on to it. Then we have a German philosopher called Friedrich Nietzsche, who dropped the quote that led to an entire Kelly Clarkson song, "Say it with me, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Now, Nietzsche is not saying that all suffering will end in strength here. Instead, he is saying that one should take the suffering as a chance to build strength, and that those who already are strong are those who can do it. In other words, Nietzsche argues that the struggles create greatness, the pain forces overcoming, and great leaders are born from hardships. However, he also warned people that trauma can break people, and strength is the exception instead of the rule. So, in general, it's kind of a open thing, you know? Finally, I want to talk about Buddhist philosophy and what suffering brings. So, in general, the role of suffering in Buddhist philosophy is important to understanding the human experience and the path of enlightenment. For Buddhists, by recognizing and addressing the root causes for suffering in life, individuals can transform their lives and achieve lasting peace and happiness, which is very nice to think about. So, I know what you're probably thinking now. The skeptics. This sounds very promising, but it's only in theory, right? No. Believe it or not, but there are people who, from past suffering, have risen to become great leaders in history. So I'm going to list some examples just for you guys. First up is a 27-year prisoner who suffered greatly during this time and was presumed dead to the entire world, only to rise as a great leader. The president of South Africa, in fact, Nelson Mandela. After his time in prison for opposing South Africa's apartheid system and facing harsh conditions designed to break his spirit, he emerged unbroken and rose to presidency, improving the living standards and facilities of South Africa's black population. Next up, we have an inspirational statesman, writer, orator, and leader who led his home country of Britain to victory in the Second World War, Winston Churchill. After going through symptoms such as depression, unaliving intention, mania, and a decreased need for sleep, it was said that Winston Churchill had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder at middle age, though that's not official. However, he would always refer to this as his black dog. Despite this, he rose above it and became a person who is considered to be one of the greatest leaders in history, specifically during World War II. Finally, an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, and philosopher who created something called logotherapy, a therapeutic approach that helps people find personal meaning in life. Viktor Frankl. Now, all the way back in 1942, Viktor and his wife Tilly were deported to Theresienstadt concentration camp, where he and his wife were separated, and he was stuck there for 3 years. And even more tragic, his wife sadly didn't survive those 3 years. After this experience, he created logotherapy and believed that meaning through suffering changes the world, which is very inspiring. So in the end, is the claim true? Do only the most broken people become great leaders? Well, the answer is yes and no. It's true in the sense that hardship can create resilience, empathetic and perceptive leaders, where trauma motivates people to protect others, and many great leaders come from painful pasts. However, it is also false in the sense that trauma doesn't automatically create greatness, and that people, while are harmed, they won't always be strengthened by the trauma. It's also important to note that broken people are not inherently better leaders. But what's more important is that leaders aren't great because they are broken, they're great because they rebuild themselves. They've turned pain into empathy, struggle into resilience, trauma into wisdom, and loss into purpose. It isn't brokenness that is the source of their greatness, but instead the transformation is. So, hope you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, watch Clone Wars please.
Oh, shoot, I'm not the commander. He's the commander. Guess I'm the commander now.